Well, we'll go ahead and jump in. We're at 6 o'clock. So I'm sure Joe and Emily, you guys probably know Kade already from doing your interns, but Kade is the pro on working on remote work. So his content is always, I mean, I think this is probably like the third or fourth time I get to listen, and is always something good that comes out of it, though. No,
I
I
feel
always
very
enjoy it.
bad for you.
Yeah, no. I always feel like I'm the one that's getting the treat here. It's always something good. It's
Yeah.
always relevant and applicable.
Wow.
So, and those are the things that I need in my life. So, um, it's a small group, Emily and Joe. So you guys, like, let's just have some dialogue and conversation. Um, I know that Cade's not necessarily into lectures and seminars, but he's into talking with everybody. So let's do that tonight. If
Cool.
you guys have Joe cannot, he does not have video on tonight, but if you guys have any other tech issues, let me know, Joe or Emily.
Cool. Hi, Joe and Emily. Good to see you. I hope you're having a great week. Just three things I'm going to cover real quick. And then, if you want to ask questions or if there's something more specific that I can speak into that would be helpful to you, then I'm happy to do that. I guess before I explain what remote work is, can you tell me what remote work is or what you think remote work is? No wrong answers. Just give it a whirl.
First image that comes to my mind is mostly a lot of meetings, which is kind of how it's been.
Hey, it's not too inaccurate. Okay. Anything else that comes to your mind?
One of my professors did kind of a remote work thing as an intern. He was in charge of like his own little wildlife area, and he was the only one out there for about 6 months. And so he had to do a lot of like communication online and stuff like that. So
Yeah. I think both of those can be elements. So remote work, like I guess a technical definition of remote work is work done outside of a traditional office. So most of the people in our lives that we know, they show up to work at 8 or 9, they leave at 4 or 5, they have an hour-long lunch break. I mean, I'm oversimplifying it, but most people, I call it working physically located. Like you're physically located in an office or a corporate headquarters or a school or a hospital or whatever the case may be. And so remote work is the opposite of that. So remote work is doing your profession, your vocation, your work, but literally doing it from anywhere at any time. And so, for example, our team has around 50 people on it, and we're a fully distributed team. So I'm in Nebraska right now. We're traveling for the next 5 weeks. We have people in Nashville, North Carolina, Alabama, New York, California, Pakistan, and so we're all a team. We're all full-time employees. We all have very specific work. We serve clients. We do work, but we do it basically wherever we have an internet connection, and that's really the definition of remote work. And so certainly elements of what Joe said and Emily, what you shared are true. But remote work is work that isn't dependent on being physically located in a specific place all the time in order to do your work. And so I just kind of wanted to level set on that. Two other things I wanted to share. One, the first thing that I wanted to talk about is reasons to work remotely, or at least to consider working remotely. And these are just our experience. We've done this for a long time now, and it's just our experience. It's not right or wrong, or other people may have different experiences, but this has been our experience up to this point. One is more focus and productivity. We have an office in Lubbock, and when I'm in that office, I am distracted. People come into my office. You go out to fill up your coffee cup thinking it's going to take 2 minutes. And the next thing you know, 30 minutes later, you're finally back at your desk. Someone walks in the back door, stops at your office on the way through. Someone in the community wants to know what you do. So they knock on the front door and the office manager comes and says, "Hey, Kate, someone's asking for you." So next thing you know, you're talking to them and you've wasted 45 minutes. And so there's a whole lot more distraction and a lot more things kind of pulling at you. And what our team across the board really has found is that when we work remotely, you can really focus and be more productive because you're in a more controlled environment. So that's, I think, the first reason that comes to my mind to really consider remote work. Second is more flexibility. I think if you were to poll our team, probably one of the things they're most thankful for about remote work is flexibility. So for example, of course I own the company, but really anybody in our team can do what I'm doing. We left 10 days ago on a 5-week trip in our motorhome. We'll visit 4 national parks, several monuments. We're on currently visiting my wife's grandmother for 9 days. And I've been in Zoom meetings, to Joe's point, since 7 o'clock this morning, and just had a couple-hour break. And now here I am again on a Zoom call. So the flexibility it offers is profound. My 9 and 8-year-old have visited half a dozen national parks, have been to 12 to 13 states already, and have got to experience a whole lot more than most 9 and 8-year-olds because our work is flexible. And so it's probably one of my favorite things, honestly, is that as long as I have a good internet connection and my laptop, I can be very productive. I can serve our team, I can serve our clients, and I can do things like this. And so more flexibility is another reason to consider remote work. Another one I find to be really powerful, and I think our team would agree, is balance. It's not necessarily the nature of remote work that creates more balance, but what you typically find with companies who allow remote work is an entirely different kind of culture. What you find at most, again, not to be over simplistic or over generalistic, but what you find mostly with people who have traditional work structures is they have traditional work cultures. And most work cultures are not exactly flexible. You have, 2 weeks off a year, you have 2 or 3 sick days, and, the rest of your year is just pretty normal, right? You show up to work, you do your work, you leave work. And it's pretty rigid in that way for the most part. And what you're going to find with most companies that allow you to work remotely is a lot more flexibility within the culture. So for example, my COO, I requested a meeting with her tomorrow, and I said, hey, can you meet at 10 o'clock? She can't because she has a chiropractor appointment and a couple things going on. So she's getting online early and she'll stay online late. So she moves her work around to be flexible as it relates to her life. And so you have to be careful there. Like one thing, like for new employees that we have to really stress when they've never worked remotely is like, just because you work remotely and have flexibility, it doesn't mean you should leverage that flexibility for everything. So like going and getting your car washed in the middle of the day isn't taking advantage of flexibility. It's like doing the wrong thing, or scheduling an oil change in the middle of the morning just because you can. So, there comes a responsibility with remote work, but generally speaking, there's a lot of flexibility. And then the last thing I would share, I could keep going for 30 minutes on all the reasons to consider working remotely, or at least pursuing an opportunity that may allow you to work remotely. But the last one would be it allows you to live wherever you want. So I know a tremendous amount of people who are from rural communities who would love to live in rural communities and would love to raise their children in rural communities. And yet that the work they have and the vocation they have, don't allow for that kind of, work. And so therefore they end up living in highly populated or metro areas because that's where their work is. And what you'll find, with remote work is it doesn't matter where you live. For example, we have a young man who is a web developer on our team who lives in Concordia, Kansas. He grew up there, wanted to live there, wanted to move back there when he got out of K-State. And because he works remotely for our company, he gets to do work he loves, where he loves. And that's a really profound thing. And increasingly becoming profound as pandemics, global economic crises, and cultural, whatever you call these things happen. You're going to find a lot of people who would really love, maybe the pace and the flexibility of living in a rural community. The last thing I would share with you are things to consider if you're processing and trying to think through if you want to work remotely. I'll share these things, and if you have questions or if you want to unpack something in more detail, we can do that. But here are some critical things to really consider. One would be self-discipline. If you are not naturally self-disciplined, then working remotely would be really dangerous for you and not setting yourself up for success. And there's nothing wrong with that. Some people just need the structure of going into an office and having that additional accountability of being involved with a team and around a team. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's something you need to be self-aware of before you pursue remote work. If you are not self-disciplined, remote work will eat you up and spit you out because you will get very behind. You will end up not being organized. You will not be accessible to your team. You'll get behind on your work, and it'll just kind of start falling apart on you. And so you really got to be self-disciplined. You have to have the ability to focus. If you do not have examples in your life where you demonstrate the ability to set boundaries, to set parameters, and to really focus on a specific thing, if you don't have a track record of that, then you may really want to reconsider pursuing remote work. Because if you're really scattered and you don't have the ability to focus, you're going to have a real hard time being productive, and therefore you'll have a hard time contributing to your team, and therefore you'll set yourself up for failure. So that's also something you want to consider. A couple more things to consider. One would be environment. If you don't have a good home office, or if you don't have an environment that you can really control, then remote work would be really hard. Our team, because you're not sitting beside someone, you do end up connecting a lot more, to Joe's point earlier about having a lot of meetings. They're not long meetings, but you end up having to create more meetings to be able to communicate and connect. And so if you're in an environment where you can't control it, like you're in a coffee shop all the time, or, you have a bunch of roommates and you're all working in the living room and it's loud and, it's messy and you can't control your environment, you're going to really, you're not going to really succeed at remote work. And so having a controlled environment is really critical. And then the other thing is something also to be self-aware about is your ability to communicate. Working remotely requires you to be a very intentional communicator. It requires you to be a very consistent communicator. It requires you to be a very diverse communicator in the sense that you have to have the ability to have Zoom calls. You have to have the ability to be good at written communication. You just have to be good at every form of communication there is, because remote work is nuanced and you don't have the advantage of being face-to-face. You have to be that extra good at the other methods of communication in order to really have a thriving culture as a team. And so if communication is something that you really struggle with, or is something that creates a lot of friction for you, or it's something that you don't like, then it's not to say you can't work remotely, but you're going to want to really think through how to work through those things, because it's really essential to be effective at communication if you're going to work remotely. So that's what I want to share with you. I want to share with you what remote work is in the event that you didn't know. I think you do. 2 is reasons to consider pursuing remote work or pursuing a company that allows remote work. And then also things just to consider, if you're genuinely interested and you're trying to process if remote work would be something that you would be interested in and thrive in. So with that, if you have questions or if there's other things that you want to dive into, I love talking about remote work, and I'm happy to expand upon anything that might interest you.
So,
All right.
Go ahead, Joe.
Go ahead.
sorry.
Yeah.
This might be a bit of a odd question. Would you have any idea on if I say I start working for a company and then I decide to approach, maybe I'm working for 1 or 2 years and I decide to approach the topic of, hey, do you think maybe we could do some of this work remote? Would there be any kind of things that I wouldn't expect to have to discuss with an employer?
Yeah, hey man, that is a great question and a really good idea. So a lot of employers are still trying to, of course, COVID, kind of forced a lot of people to consider remote work that maybe traditionally wouldn't. And so there's a good chance there's a lot more organizations out there in the coming years that are going to be a lot more open to remote work because of necessity. But let's say you're working for, I don't know, an organization that's never historically had remote employees, but the work you do is very well kind of suited for remote work. What I would do, Joe, is go to them and say, okay, I've been with you a couple of years. I love working here. And I would like to consider doing some of my work remotely. Would you be willing to allow me to work remotely 1 day a week? And set some definition around it, set some what success looks like, like kind of be proactive in communicating to them how you're going to hold yourself accountable and, how you'll be available and how you'll communicate that way. Because, if you're having to go to them saying, hey, can I work remotely? They very likely haven't set up, good systems and processes and tools to be able to facilitate remote work. So do that for them as you ask them. So don't just go to them and say, hey, can I work remotely? And then wait on their answer. Go to them and say, hey, would you be interested would you be willing to allow me to work 1 day a week or 2 days a week remotely? Here's what it would look like. Here's when I'd be available. Here's how I would submit my work. Here's how I'd communicate, or whatever. The main point isn't trying to be prescriptive to you because I don't know your work or the situation, but be real intentional about thinking through all the pitfalls and be proactive in explaining to them how you'll handle those. And I think they're much more likely to consider it.
Okay, thank you.
I would also encourage you to really develop a relationship with them that's very personal, well in advance, because the more they trust you and the more they connect with you and the more you add value to their organization and they know that value, the much more likely they are to say, yeah, you know what, that would work. We trust you. You've done nothing but a good job. You've excelled at your work. We would be happy to consider that 1 day a week or something. You know what I mean? And then just start working into it. And, I think the other thing I might do, and you've got to really consider this because, their personality, their temperament and all these things. But I think another thing I may consider is saying, I'd like to start out at 1 day a week, but long-term, I'd really like to move to XYZ, but I love this work. It's meaningful. I'd like to keep doing it. And I'd like to spend a year earning your trust, to be able to keep my job, but to move back to XYZ. So those are the different types of things you can consider if that's ultimately the route you want to go.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Good question.
Emily, do you have any questions?
Sure. How did you know that remote work was the thing for you? Like, how did you figure out like that balance between self-discipline in your personal life and keeping everything organized? Like, was just what you needed to do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. We kind of lucked into remote work as a company. One of our really great employees used to live in Lubbock and work in our office, and she was really good. And her husband got into grad school in California, and so they were moving. And we're like, well, we're not going to lose her. Like we wanted her to keep working for us. And so we said, hey, let's try this whole remote thing. And so by exploring remote work with her, we started to really discover how it works and what we really liked about it. And so then we started to change the entire culture of our company to be a distributed team. And in so doing, we started working remotely more often. Prior to us being a distributed team, I'd work 60 hours a week and I'd just be in my office and for no particular reason other than that's just what we did. And so we kind of discovered how much we loved remote work by having an employee that we didn't want to lose, who we allowed to work remotely from California. And then we learned what worked and what didn't work. And we started to kind of like work into these guardrails that I've shared with you. And so when you say, how did you know, we learned by failure, right? Like one of the biggest mistakes we made early on is not communicating very often. And so then you end up going, oh my gosh, we haven't talked to Molly in 3 weeks, just because she's out of sight, out of mind. And so, we learned a lot about things that are really essential to remote work, by doing it over the last 3 or 4 years and kind of uncovering these really essential things to consider. But then for me personally, like it really fits my personality, like perfectly. Like I don't like doing the same thing all the time. I don't like being in the same place, all year long. I love to travel. I love productivity. And so when I can't, this is the honest truth. I can work 4 to 5 hours a day on the road and get as much or more done than if I were in my office for 8 to 9 hours. And it's the honest truth. And so when I really kind of discovered that, not only did I want our team to be more productive, but, I started really enjoying it. And lucky for me, I've never struggled with self-discipline. It's, I'm not perfect at it by any means and can definitely get better at it. But I don't struggle with prioritizing what needs to get done and then like being accountable to it. And so I kind of got lucky on a personal level that it just really fits just fits what I do really well.
That was a good question. So I have some questions for you, even though I've heard this numerous times. It's still sparring different curiosity in me. When you talked about like people can live all over, for people that do remote work as a head of a company, how do you determine salaries? Because often salaries are based upon the geographical location that people live.
Yeah, that's a great question. We do this two ways. We try to be indifferent to where someone lives and pay them market value and fair based on their experience and skill set and the value they're going to bring our company. And so I think hiring people specifically in rural communities is a major competitive advantage for us, because a web developer doesn't expect to make the same in Concordia, Kansas as someone who lives in New York City. So that's just kind of fact of life, really, for any position. And so that does play a small part in it. But our commitment to our team is just to be fair. So, we don't really care where you live. What we really try to prioritize is skill set, experience, value, and then pay you what would be fair for that role, that experience, those skill sets. So that's how we approach that. Now, it does give us a little bit of leverage, in a positive sense, because we can really bless Matthew. I mean, Matthew's probably in the top 5% of wage earners in his entire community, and he's 21 years old. And yet I'm paying him less than I would if someone lived in New York City. So it's a balance, right? So it would be disingenuous of me to say, oh, we pay Matthew the same because he, as if he lived in New York City. That's not true. The flip side of that is we're really fair, and we're never going to treat Matthew differently, just because his cost of living happens to be, a lot better than someone who lives in New York City. And so we try to balance those two things. And so, yeah, we try to be right in the middle. You know what I mean? I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a little bit of, I think in all jobs, cost of living is always part of the factor of creating a salary schedule or a plan. And so that's a really unique situation that you guys are in, that you really can bless certain people. Or honestly, if somebody lived in a very metro area, they could probably go out and get one of those jobs that's more competitive for the same field too.
Yeah. There are two more things that I can think of. Like, we have a developer who's literally could work anywhere, eBay, just Amazon, Apple, like he's literally that good. And he lives in Nashville, Tennessee. He is a senior level developer. And we have ranges. So like we have a formula, basically tiers of salaries based on experience and skill set. And it's kind of a formula. And so he was in the highest formula. So we said, hey, this is the best we can do. And it was like about $35,000 less per year than he was getting offered by this other company. But our culture was better. The flexibility was better. He didn't have to commute every day, and so that played into his decision-making process. And so one of the things we look for in our people, specifically for our company, is culture fits, not just salary fits. And so what you're getting with us isn't just a salary. So we try to be really fair and competitive there, but we make up a lot of ground by our culture. Just our culture, which means a lot of things. But those are the kinds of things that go into, really our job offers and how we position it and things like that.
Hi, Jennifer. I'm glad that you could join us. We're talking about remote learning. So right now we're kind of in the Q&A part. So if you have any questions that you're curious about, feel free to unmute and ask Kade.
Okay, thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? Emily? Joe?
This was a really thorough presentation, so it's hard to think of things not expected.
That's okay. Yeah, no, that's okay. Okay, so I have some more questions for you, more from the administrative side of it. So let's just say, what if this doesn't work for somebody? What if somebody has not done remote work before and they're like, hey, I want to try this. You hire them, you give them a shot. Do you have some parameters of things that you're doing to check in with them to make sure that they're, learning some of these other skills that are not taught necessarily in a standard job, such as that balance part, or, how to communicate more efficiently, that self-discipline? So do you already have some procedures set up to help?
Yeah, a couple of things. Also a good question. First of all, we try real hard not to hire people that have never worked remotely before. And I think a lot of companies do that. And so if you're on this call and you're interested in pursuing remote work, I would start right now trying to find internships and unique work experience that allowed you to build your experience working remotely. Because if you apply for a remote job and you've never worked remotely and you don't have a tremendous amount of work experience with which at your age you don't, just by the sheer necessity of your age, you're going to be behind the 8 ball. And so my first piece of advice would be, if you're interested in remote work, then find opportunities to gain remote work experience, so that really builds your case, when you actually start pursuing a full-time, kind of remote vocation. But then, so that's the first thing I'd do if I were you. For our company specifically, we just, we're set up to be a fully distributed team. So for example, we have a chief of staff and her only job is to care for our people. So she has regular check-ins with all 50 individuals. Every other Monday, we do what we call a primitive pulse check, which is video communication on what's going on in the company. Every other week, we have just a 30-minute all-team check-in on Zoom, where all 50 people are on Zoom. Maybe someone from our senior leadership team shares something that's going on. We might do a team building activity, just something fun, and reasons to talk to different teams that you may not talk to regularly. And then once a month, we have an all-team meeting, which is an hour long, where we go into pretty great in-depth detail about our finances and things that are going on and sales opportunities and, successes and failures and things like that. And so that that connectivity with each other on a regular, consistent cadence really allows us to stay connected and to prevent, the pitfalls of being disconnected or not communicating regularly or not knowing what's going on. And so just the structure of our team, the structure of our communication, the structure of our connectivity, and as it relates to, regular team meetings and things of that nature, allows us to stay connected and prevent anyone kind of, wandering off, off the farm, And so, so that's how we do it. And so that's how we do it internally, but all of our people have worked remotely before. And so, so it heightens the success that we have being a distributed team. And so that to me would be the real critical thing for a young person who wanted to work remotely, is you got to get experience working remotely. There's just no other way around it.
Emily, Joe, or Jennifer, have you guys had any experience working remotely?
Not at all.
There's a limited amount, but this is technically part of it.
That's great. Have you enjoyed it, Joe, or what's your experience been like so far?
So far, it's been just a couple of phone calls, and so I helped someone out with printer issues. It's kind of interesting because I had to look up all the settings because that was a bit confusing. But
what is your internship? What are you doing?
So it's helping teach a lot of people about how to use their computers and how to build off of that information. Mainly just to kind of, a lot of these people want to learn how to pay their bills online, to pay their taxes, and I'm just mostly opening up these websites and showing how they can do that. Or sometimes it's a small tech issue, like a printer.
Yeah. And what has been the most challenging, part about remotely helping people navigate those things and learn them?
So biggest thing is just kind of knowing what the websites are and how they're seeing the screen.
Yeah.
And like I said, it hasn't been a lot because most of these people really would prefer to have a person-to-person experience. So we're mostly just kind of leaving everything to later and just trying to have a little bit more protective equipment and having a meeting in an area where there's not going to be dangerous spread.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, it looks like we're ready to move on with it, and then it hasn't been like I said, like how I've been saying, it's been slow. So while it's not much, it's at least something.
Right.
Kind of similar to how last year I had that experience where I was doing a lot more communication in Spanish professionally. It's just something extra that it's a small experience that I add to my resume that not a lot of people really walk into a career fair with.
Right.
That's how I see it personally.
That's great. Yeah, no, I think that's good. I think every little bit helps.
Yeah, I like your outlook on that, Joe. It's just another skill to be learning. So my last question, Kade, is, so much of work or anything is interaction with other people. So what's the toll for not having a lot of person-to-person interaction, but through the computer? And then I would love to hear some stories, and I'm sure you have some, about how communication did not work out with that inability to read those nonverbal cues. I can just only imagine, like, I'd get myself in so much trouble.
Yeah. I think on the social interaction thing, it's a great point. There's a couple of things. One is we have regular hangouts all the time outside of work that are remote. So like we'll do a happy hour and everyone brings a drink, and we don't talk about work. Like we literally, it's like you're meeting at a bar somewhere and you're having a drink together and just talking about whatever you're talking about. So we do things like that all the time. So they have every week there's a trivia night. There's happy hours all the time. We'll do like things around like college football or the Super Bowl or the World Series or whatever. So like we'll have watch parties, but we're consistently doing things that we would consider social. So it's not the same thing, right? But it's really close. And so we do those things consistently. And again, it's just all about nurturing those relationships. And so again, our chief of staff oversees all that. And the thing that's really critical about those things is that they're consistent and that you're not just doing them once or twice a year, but that you're doing them regularly. She organizes, discussion groups around things that are going on right now, like just to interact about the things that are happening culturally and for people to share their opinions and dialogue and converse. Just like you were chewing the fat, over a meal, you'd be talking about what's going on in the world. And so she organizes those kinds of things and, gives people the opportunity to be able to do that. And it helps feel connected. You know what I mean? It helps people feel connected to each other beyond just the work itself. But yeah, I think the biggest examples of communication fails were really early on, where lots of big things were happening in the company. And because we didn't have regular communication as a team, someone might look up in 3 weeks and realize we had lost a client or gained a client, and they didn't even know it until, they were asked to a meeting and they didn't know what was going on. Just things like that on every different level, whether they're about finances or HR issues, or maybe someone's kind of disappeared and you didn't know it because you're not communicating regularly, and someone's just not engaged with the team and they're not following through, or, the work's not getting done and you didn't know it because you didn't have a good system or process in place, that really tracked work and had a good project management system. So those are typically the areas where we've really failed and kind of had mud on our face, and then had to kind of reevaluate, like, okay, how do we move through this and improve? So.
Those hard knock lessons sometimes are the best learning tools, though.
Yes. Yeah, they can really help shape, how you move forward, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you guys have any other questions? No? Emily, what are you hoping to do as a career goal? I'm just curious if remote learning is something that could tie into that.
I don't know. I don't know if there's many opportunities for remote work in wildlife biology, but that's definitely something I'd be willing to look into. So,
yeah.
I think where your experience will come in is you'll be traveling a lot, so by the nature of, doing the work you're doing, you're going to have to be good at digital communication because you're not going to be in the office all the time, I assume. And so you'll certainly get to practice a lot of these best practices, as you're doing your work. And, traveling to different locations or, whatever it is that you're doing. So it won't be like full-time remote work necessarily, but there'll be a lot of elements of having to be really good at these types of things to really excel at your work.
Yeah, I agree. Joe, what about you? What is your long-term goals and what type of profession? And I'm just curious if that could involve remote work.
So I'm actually a bit lucky because my plan is to be in engineering and potentially food production. And even now, I know other people who are interning for places like Cargill, which they're already doing remote work throughout this. They had to set up the infrastructure, but it only took about 2 weeks for them to actually get it down right. So hopefully management, it might be a possibility, and I might even still have a reason to go to the plant if I really need to.
That's great. That's great. So is that what you are hoping? Is you're hoping for remote work, or is it something that you're still just kind of exploring?
I think I'm exploring it. I don't know for sure if it's for me. I like having a place that I go to, and sometimes having a commute is kind of nice for me personally. But I also think I like the idea of not having to take an extra hour or two out of the day just to get to where I'm going to work.
Yeah, those are some good advantages and disadvantages for sure. Jennifer, what about you? What are you hoping to do long term?
I want to start bringing more food into our community and kind of just like trying to like have more people grow their own food and have more healthy crops, because that's a thing we lost in our culture. And I feel like that was a big part of the way like our life was. And I really want to bring that back, especially for this young youth. I feel like it would be really important. And just for everyone to be healthy just in our community, that'd be really great too.
I love that passion. You always talk about every meeting, and it is so good. It's so refreshing, and you are at the beginning stages of being able to work on that and to create that for your future, and it's just wonderful. It's great. Well, Kade, we are a little bit early to end, but is there anything
You
else?
squeezed 38 minutes out of that, Abby. That's very impressive. Very good. 38 minutes. I say you get a green check box for this evening's call. So, Emily,
Well,
Joe, Jennifer, thank y'all. Thank you for your time and attention and for your good questions. And hope you have a good rest of your summer with your internship. And if I can do anything for you, just let me know.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I totally agree. I hope to see you guys on more Wednesday calls. I'm not sure what next week's is, but you'll be getting an email following up soon. And if you guys need anything, you guys know how to reach us. So have a good weekend.
Thanks, Abby. Bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye.